So I am back and bringing you guys a brand new movie review. Today we're going to be reviewing Birds of Prey. So I just got back from seeing Birds of Prey in the movie theater. And when I got to the movie theater, I was a little bit worried because I sat in my film and I was waiting there for the pre-roll ads and everything. Nobody was showing up. I was kind of counting down the minutes till, the movie started. And right as the trailer started, that's when people started showing up. And there's about 15 of us in the theater. And the theater sat about 200 people total. So I knew that this movie was not going to probably be as good as you would probably hope it would be, just because it is a superhero film. And this is taken over after the events of Suicide Squad, as well as the other Batman films, as well as Justice League. And those movies really haven't had the success necessary to kind of bring in a huge audiences, kind of like what the fans had wanted. I myself, I really did like Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad. I really didn't want to go in there trying to hate this film. I really wanted to enjoy myself in this film. And I just walk out of the movie theater going like, what the fuck did I just watch? Like, this entire movie happens because Harley Quinn wants pretty much an egg sandwich, and she's pretty much being chased by Renee Montoya, who's a police officer. And there's even a part in this movie where she has to kind of prove herself against the men in this movie. This movie is definitely a female empowerment movie, and that's fine and dandy if you want to do that, if you want to make this a sort of, female empowerment film. But this isn't the first time you've ever seen something like that in the theaters. This isn't the first time that there's ever been sort of a female-centric film. You got things like Aliens and Terminator, and all of those have been sort of better films in the past. And I think that this movie is really disappointing for me because I wanted to care about Harley Quinn, because I really do like Harley Quinn as a character. In Suicide Squad, she's probably my favorite of the characters that were introduced in that movie, alongside Will Smith's Deadshot, which Harley Quinn or Margot Robbie. She really wanted to get this movie off the ground. I think Margot Robbie spent, several years, probably 5 years in total, trying to get a Harley Quinn solo film off the ground and into Warner Brothers' hands. And, they were working on it, and then it'd get pushed back, and then it'd get delayed, and then it'd get changed altogether. And so then we get sort of Birds of Prey. And this movie is pretty much a heist film. It's about her trying to get this diamond back from this girl who's basically a pickpocket. She's pickpocketing, Black Canary, but, she eventually finds this diamond. And, Black Canary is in this movie, and she's a lot different than she is in the comic books. This is pretty much a loosely based, comic book film with things that happen in this universe that really don't make that much sense. One of which, in the beginning, Harley Quinn is upset about the Joker. Her and the Joker pretty much split up, and she goes through the 5 stages of grief, which everybody has dealt with that at some point in their life, especially in a relationship. And then she's like, oh, I'm going to prove it to the Joker that I don't longer need him, that I'm pretty much an independent person, and I can pretty much do whatever I want by blowing up an Acme power plant. And that doesn't even set off alarm bells for Batman, who's like the prime fighting vigilante of Gotham. Like, you'd think you would be on alert if something like that happened. And Batman's nowhere to be seen throughout this film. We mentioned it once through this movie. It's just a slight remark. It doesn't really matter. Nothing in this movie really does matter. So I think that if you wanted to skip this movie, you wouldn't be at fault for wanting to skip this film. The only thing I think of that, anybody who cared actually about this movie was not only Margot Robbie, but Ewan McGregor. Ewan McGregor is in this role, and he's pretty much the chief misogyner, as he likes to call it. And he went on this entire sort of marketing campaign saying that men's time is done, and that misogynists are going to be put in their place, that if you don't like this movie, you're pretty much a misogynist. And that's not true, because, I think that I really did like Terminator. I really liked sort of Aliens when I was a kid, and those are my first couple of rated R movies. And this movie is a rated R movie, which I don't know why it's a rated R movie, due to the fact that they don't really have that many sequences where there's ultra violence like John Wick. There's nobody getting their hands chopped off, or they shoot somebody in the head and blood just kind of goes everywhere. This is not a violent or gory film in the least. I think this is rather tame in terms of a R-rated film. I really do want to see more R-rated movies in the future. I know that they've kind of stopped doing that just because the whole comic book scene, but I really do think that, there is a place for more mature rated R-rated films, especially in the comic book era. And I really do think that, as a fan of comic book movies, I think that they should definitely try more R-rated films in the future. But this is just not one of those films. Like, the entire time I was waiting for them to give me a reason to care, and I just sat there thinking, why am I watching this? Why am I not going to see Bad Boys for Life again? Which, when I walked in the theater, some couple I thought was going to see Harley Quinn Birds of Prey movie with me, and apparently they were waiting to go see Bad Boys for Life. And I'm like, I wish I would have went and saw that movie with you guys, because I probably would have had a better time seeing that movie. So yeah, I sat in that movie theater. I was expecting, this to be a decent movie, because I heard that this movie was okay, that it wasn't too bad, that it wasn't too woke. When I'm watching these movies, the things that I'm looking for are rewatchability factor, the one-liners, and the story. Because if you have all those three things, you're going to have a movie that's going to be talked about for a while to come. And is this movie going to be talked about for a while to come? Is this going to be something that's studied in sort of film classes? I don't think so. I don't think this is going to be one of those movies that people even remember, as even being a remotely good superhero film. And that's a shame, because I really did like the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight series. I liked the whole Batman saga that he had created, even The Dark Knight Rises, which a lot of people criticize for being a shit movie, but I don't really think it's really that bad of a film. And so I pretty much grew up on sort of the Marvel movies and the DCEU movies, and you can kind of like them both. You don't have to kind of separate your love for Marvel or DC, just the same way that you don't have to separate your love for, Star Trek or Star Wars. I just don't see that as something that you have to worry about here. And I think that, fans of Harley Quinn might actually like this movie. Fans of, SJW politics might like this. I'm just not really a fan of that that stuff in my movies. I think that a movie should focus on the story first and developing the characters, and then the fact that this is an hour and 40-minute long runtime. When you're seeing this movie in the theaters, I personally was going, holy shit, this movie feels like it's long, even though it's not that long of a film. I was kind of like looking at my phone on my alarm clock just to kind of see how long it was going to be over till this movie is finished, and that's not something you want to have happen when you're watching a film. You want to have sort of an antagonist, a protagonist that people like to care about, and they make Harley Quinn sort of the anti-hero of this film, which I don't mind if they're going to make her sort of the anti-hero, because her and Joker have sort of an abusive relationship, and that was one thing I didn't really like about this movie, was the Joker is not even in this film. You know, they kind of cut away from the scenes where the Joker's in it. They show flashbacks towards where you see sort of Margot Robbie in Suicide Squad as she's going through the Acme plant, and how they basically created her character. And whenever, you know, Jared Leto's scenes come up, you know, they just kind of cut away, like they don't really want to show that part, like they're kind of embarrassed to have him in there. But I mean, you could have had him in sort of that role because he is a part of that universe and he was there before in Suicide Squad, so I don't know why they didn't use that. So I was a little bit confused. There also is another couple of confusing scenes that happen in this film, one of which is Renee Montoya. She's a police officer. She's trying to work her way up through the precinct that she works in, which eventually does get attacked by Harley Quinn at one point in time in this movie. They give sort of the case that she's going along with, you know, sort of the Acme plant getting blown up and stuff, like I mentioned earlier on in the film, to this sort of younger agent and stuff like that, and it's actually a male. Like, all the men in this movie are portrayed as either being dicks, assholes, or just plain douchebags, and I don't really think that's fair. Like, in these female empowerment movies, if you want to portray them as both being equal, you can't just prop up one gender, females and stuff like that, and then shit talk sort of the males of the franchise. Like, you kind of have to have both sides being propped up at the same time in order to be considered as equal, because that's the true definition of equality. And, you know, this movie shits on men a lot, and that's why I think that, you know, SJWs probably will like this movie more than people that are common sense thinkers like me. I was waiting for a moment to care in this movie. I was waiting for a moment to kind of give me that sort of feeling that you actually do care about, you know, Margot Robbie's concern, because, you know, she's heartbroken over the Joker. She's heartbroken over the fact that they're split up, and now because of that fact, it's kind of like John Wick, where because she's no longer with the Joker, that she has kind of a target on her back throughout Gotham, which I thought was pretty cool that they kind of borrowed sort of that sort of plot line for this film, that it wasn't just a straight up heist film, because I think that would have been really boring and really something that was a little bit cliched. It didn't really work for a couple of different reasons, because eventually she does pair up with Black Mask. Black Mask is this sort of eccentric billionaire in Gotham City. He's really wealthy. He takes out sort of villains, and he, you know, pretty much rips off their heads and stuff like that. He pretty much rips off their faces and kind of just skins people. I think that was a pretty unique character, but he's still kind of a douchebag. He's only there because he hates Harley Quinn. She was involved with the Joker. Also the fact that, you know, she has a vagina, which they specifically state in this film. And I was like, you know, really? You're going to really go that route? That the only reason why he kind of hates her is because of the fact that she's got sort of a genitalia down there, and it's like no normal sort of villain or even sort of a real person in general would kind of hate her for that reason. In these kind of movies, you do have to kind of put your willing suspension of disbelief out there. You kind of do have to just kind of sit back and kind of give what the movie's kind of giving at you. But there's only so much of that you can kind of handle. And one of these sequences is with the precinct sequence, where Harley Quinn is going in there with non-lethals. She's pretty much just taking out these guys left and right. And, you know, she's taking them out with sort of beanbag rounds and stuff like that. And it's like none of these guys in this precinct have sort of pistols or machine guns or even like shotguns to kind of take her out with. Like, you'd think that they would kind of have that so they could have self-defense. You know, it's a precinct. There's got to be sort of weaponry in there at some point. And they're just using batons and stuff to try and take her down with it. She's just kicking the shit out of them. And, you know, some of these action sequences are really great. You know, some of these action sequences are well choreographed. I will give the movie that one instance, and that's because they did hire sort of the John Wick stunt choreographer for this film. You can hire John Wick stunt choreographers all you want to, but just because you have good looking fight sequences doesn't mean that the audience is going to want to stick around for this movie, enjoy this movie for its story, because the story is just rather weak. Good visual effects and good sort of fight choreography doesn't make up for a bad film. I think that a lot of people are giving this film sort of, they're overlooking things that happen in this movie because they want to like this film, because they don't want to be portrayed as sexist. They don't want to be portrayed as misogynist. I just can't stand that. I can't stand by that and say just because there's really good action sequences here and there, that makes up for a good movie. Just because there's a couple explosions here and there, that's a mark of a good film, because it's not. Not for me. Gotta have one-liners. There's one-liners in this film that at one point in time Harley Quinn calls Huntress Robin Hood in this film, because she's just using crossbow and stuff like that, and she actually makes fun of some of the characters that just say that she's using bow and arrows and stuff. It's a crossbow. Like, what's wrong with you people and stuff like that, and she's constantly cussing up a storm. It's just one of those sequences where it's unbelievable. That whole precinct fight sequence, I was waiting for one of those officers to kind of go at Harley Quinn with a gun, and she just taking them all out. It's like you don't have anybody in there that's capable of bringing down this woman. Like, she's only 115 pounds or 120 pounds, and she's beating the shit out of everybody, which I kind of get the hint that, you know, she's a little bit crazy, she's a little zany, she's got some sort of training, probably because of the Joker, and they didn't really show that in the backstory of her character. But I just think that it's lacking in sort of the exposition scenes and sort of the flashback sequences where you kind of get her training. And they try to portray Harley Quinn as almost Deadpool, like just because she's wacky and zany doesn't mean that she's breaking fourth walls and stuff like that, which she does in this movie several times. I didn't really give a shit at those moments. Like, every time they try to make me care about this character, every time they try to give me something something to believe in these characters. It just didn't happen, and they really don't get together with the Birds of Prey till the last act of the film, which I find really disappointing, because you see that sort of fight sequence that they tried to pull through the marketing. That fight sequence looked awful, and it just looks awful even on the big screen when you got like all the sounds and the gunfire and stuff like that, which is very little gunfire in this movie, which is insane. I just didn't like this movie. I tried to like it. I think I'd probably give it about a C. If that, I don't think this movie deserves a D, because it's not as bad as sort of A Good Day to Die Hard. I've certainly saw worse movies in my time period, especially comic book films, but I don't think this movie deserves sort of that D grade or the F grade. I think it's a really good, popcorn flick if you want to just turn your brain off sort of thing. But if you're trying to look too into this, if you're trying to dig deep into the psychological nature of Harley Quinn and what she's going through with her breakup and everything, which they even make fun of her for at the beginning of the film, that's just not enough for me to care. It's just not enough. And when I look for these characters, I look for, things that I want to care about, because it just seems more realistic. And I know these movies are comic book films, so you're going to get that whole notion of, oh, it's just a comic book and you shouldn't take it so seriously. But even a movie, there's got to be stuff that's realistic about it. And this movie's just not something you should rush out to go see. I braved winter weather in this, and I thought maybe due to that fact there wasn't going to be that many people in the theater. And there were surprisingly 15 people in a 206-seat theater, which was a little bit more than I was expecting. I was expecting maybe 2 people, and I was the first person to buy my ticket for this film. But that's the reason why I'd have to give this movie a C. I think that the visual effects are decent. The choreography is pretty decent as well. The writing by Christina Hudson, who wrote Bumblebee, is okay at times, but it's choppy in others, and it doesn't make sense because they're doing all these flash forwards and flashbacks and stuff like that. I just, the only time I do give him credit for is during that scene where Black Mass is just being a dick. There's people that are laughing, and he makes that girl kind of get up on the table and stuff, and he has the other guy, that either her boyfriend or her friend or whatever, and take a knife and kind of rip off her dress. I kind of did care, because that was kind of a douchebag movie. It's like, why would you do that? Even if somebody was laughing at you, you'd probably just walk away or not be such a piece of shit about it. But that was one time that I kind of give this movie props, because it almost had me. I was like, you almost got me there. The music was kind of sort of haunting. It was kind of almost like sort of the Dark Knight with the Joker theme, or sort of, I was thinking sort of a Sicario de Soldado or whatever it's called, because that music kind of sounds similar to that, but it just didn't do enough for me. And even that one scene doesn't make up for the entirety of the film. This movie really did happen because Harley Quinn was being chased by Renee Montoya, and she drops her sort of, egg sandwich, which I can kind of relate to in some ways, because I do like food a lot. I'm big into, pizza, and egg sandwiches is sort of the normal everyday thing that, she was eating in this movie. But again, it's just one of those things where I just don't care. I don't care about anything that's going on in the film. I wanted to care. I wanted to go in and not have a bad time, but I can't say that I enjoyed myself that much. And like I said in sort of my, social media feed, I'm not mad at this movie. I don't hate this movie. I'm just disappointed. This movie could have been so much more. They could have done so much with the plot. They could have made this an Arkham Asylum movie where you kind of have, a Prison Break style film, like I mentioned before, where, you see a little bit more of Harley Quinn, Joker's backstory. And this leads to, Robert Pattinson's as the Batman, where you kind of see the Batman at the end of the film, and then you get the Batmobile thing. And even the end credits scene of this movie didn't really mean that much, because I walked into that at the beginning of the film, and basically it's like Deadpool, where Harley Quinn is like, you guys are still here, why don't you guys go home, or something like that. And then she's like, oh, because you're still here, let me tell you a secret about the Batman. And that's when the whole thing kind of cuts, and then you see the Warner Brothers logo and stuff. And I've been to the Warner Brothers studio and seen all the other previous Batman stuff before, so I am a huge fan of both the DCEU and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I just wanted a better movie, and I didn't really get that. I didn't get that $10 worth that I thought it deserved, because I paid good money for that. It's hard-earned money, and I don't want to go to the theater and feel like I was just given a shit film. But I just can't say that this is a good movie. There's good elements here and there, but other than that, it doesn't make up for a crappy story. And I really don't want to shit on this movie, because I do have a friend that kind of worked on this film. That was the only reason that I went to see this movie, was because I wanted to see him. And he's in the beginning of the film. It's during that whole alleyway fight sequence, and he's not in that part for that long. He's pretty much a police officer during that scene, which he was also in a couple other things that I saw recently, which I think he's really good in. But otherwise, I would have just skipped it. I would have just stayed home and probably had a beer, which I'm doing now, and kind of watching movies, which I normally do. But is Birds of Prey a decent movie if you got nothing going on? I would have to say so. I would have to say that it's decent if you can kind of turn your brain off, if you can kind of ignore the sort of social justice aspects of this movie, which there really isn't that much. It's not a woke film all the way through, but there is some elements to it that you probably will, roll your eyes at and stuff like that. I did think the dance number between her as Marilyn Monroe, which I thought was really good, but like I said before, like just because there's elements here and there that are good doesn't make for a pretty shitty story. Rewatchability factor is a big thing, and it's one of those things that I look for in a film, and they do that stupid thing in Suicide Squad where they're kind of using the music to kind of tell a story. I don't know if I kind of talked about that when I was doing this review, but every 5 to 10 minutes there's sort of a cliched hip-hop, rap, or pop, or rock and roll music that's been in other movies before, including Suicide Squad, and it's like, can you please not do that? You don't need a musical note every single time that you walk into a new scene. It just makes the entire film feel like you're trying to tell the movie through the musical notes, and subtlety is key when you're making a movie and actually having a really good story. Some of these scenes could have worked really well if you just had no music at all. And I think the only person that really gave a shit about this film was Ewan McGregor. He seemed to be the only person there that actually cared about the film besides Margot Robbie, and I think Margot Robbie and Ewan McGregor did a really good job in Ewan McGregor playing Black Mask, even though he wasn't really given that much to work with. I like Ewan McGregor as sort of Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars and some of the other films that I've seen him in. So I mean, I would have liked to have gotten a little bit more from Ewan McGregor's character. I don't really like the fact that he was just kind of a douchebag to be a douchebag. Like, for me, the mark of a great antagonist and protagonist is that the, villain of the film feels like he's doing what he's doing is right, even though he's doing wrong. Like, think about, Darth Vader in sort of the Star Wars universe, or Thanos in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Even though he's killing off half the planet, he still thinks that what he's doing is right and that he's pretty much the hero of the story. You don't get that feeling from Black Mask. He's pretty much just doing that just because he feels like being a dick. And, I don't really like characters like that just because it doesn't give them depth. It doesn't give them sort of that reason to kind of care for the character. And you don't really care about Black Mask by the end of this film. Like, there's a big fight sequence that takes place in a fun house, and it's just so poorly choreographed and so poorly shot that it's like, I just really want this movie to be over with at that point. And so that's why I'm going to give Birds of Prey a C. Hopefully you guys learn a thing or two about the movie industry. I'm probably going to have to cut this down a little bit just because of the fact that this was a really chopped up sort of review. And the reason why is just because this movie is a huge mess. It's one of those films, and I'm really disappointed that I saw. I really would have rather, gone to see Bad Boys for Life and kind of put my money down on that movie because I feel like that movie deserves it. And even though I haven't reviewed that yet, I'm definitely going to review it further down the line because the Bad Boys franchise is something that I really do like. I like the first two movies, and it's kind of not cool to kind of say you like the Bad Boys movies because they are directed by Michael Bay, but I really did enjoy them. So, but that's beside the point. I really do think that, if you're a comic book fan and if you do care about Harley Quinn even a little bit, maybe go see this movie, when it's like $5 and stuff like that on a Tuesday somewhere. But just don't shell out $10 for this. Don't be like me who kind of shelled out $10 and paid money for popcorn and drink, because even then it's still not worth it. So that is my final thoughts and review of Birds of Prey. I might have to review Suicide Squad at some point in time. I really do like Margot Robbie as an actress. I liked her in The Wolf of Wall Street and, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, I think was the name of it, or something like that. That came out a few years ago. And I've liked her in other stuff in the past, so I don't really think it's Margot Robbie's fault per se. It's just the movie that she was given, the story that she was creating. It just wasn't that good. All the special effects in the world, all the visual effects in the world, all the CGI can't, hide a bad film. And so that's why I don't really recommend that movie that much to you guys. But as always, guys, if you like this, please rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.